For 2 years, the door had never opened. It was not a metaphor. It was not poetic exaggeration. The door was real. 3 layers of reinforced alloy fused into the rock of Outpost Carvel, sealed with biometric locks keyed to masters who never bothered to look her in the eyes. The door opened once a day, sometimes twice, just long enough for pain, hunger, or humiliation to pass through. Then it closed again. Her name once had been Leary of the 13th Bloom, a xenobiologist from the Cerati Concord. That name had meaning once. It had carried weight, respect, curiosity. It had been spoken gently by colleagues, proudly by her brood parents. Now, the guards called her asset, or specimen, or, when they were feeling honest, property. The Karzal Dominion did not take prisoners the way civilized species did. They took tools. Leary had been taken during a border skirmish, her research vessel intercepted, boarded, and gutted in less than 6 minutes. Her crew had died screaming. She had survived because she was useful. That usefulness became her curse. The first months were interrogations, chemical, neural, psychological. The Karzal were large, dense-bodied reptilians, armored in bone plates and arrogance. They prided themselves on dominance, on breaking things. They learned quickly that Leary could not be broken easily. So they learned other ways. They starved her just enough to weaken her, then punished her for collapsing. They isolated her in silence for days, then assaulted her with noise and light until her thoughts frayed. They forced her to watch recordings of her homeworld burning, fabricated at first, then real as the war expanded. And always the door closed. Leary learned to survive by narrowing her world. She counted breaths. She traced patterns in the cracks of the stone floor. She remembered fragments of songs her people sang during the blooming season, when the twin suns turned the skies violet and the air smelled of living flowers. She remembered kindness. That memory hurt the most. By the 2nd year, she no longer screamed when the door opened. That disappointed her captors. They wanted noise, fear, supplication. She gave them silence. The cell itself was small, designed for restraint rather than comfort. Gravity was set slightly higher than her species' norm, a subtle cruelty that made every movement exhausting. Her wrists bore permanent restraint scars where shock cuffs had fused with skin. One of her upper eyes had been damaged early on. She saw the world through a constant haze on that side now. She assumed she would die in that room. Not because she wanted to, but because nothing else made sense anymore. Then one day, the alarms began. They were not the local alarms she had learned to dread, the sharp, singular tones that preceded punishment or extraction. These were layered, chaotic, overlapping. The lights flickered. The floor vibrated. Weapons' fire echoed through the walls. Leary lifted her head from where it rested against the stone. Her heart began to race despite herself. Hope was dangerous. Hope had been beaten out of her long ago. Still, this was different. Explosions boomed somewhere above, closer with each passing second. The air filled with unfamiliar sounds, staccato cracks, deeper concussive thuds, and something else, voices. Shouted commands in a language she didn't recognize. The Karzal guards outside her cell barked orders, their heavy footfalls retreating down the corridor. For the first time in 2 years, they ran away from something. Leary curled inward, instinctively small. If this was an attack, then the Dominion would not leave valuable assets behind. They would purge them. The door remained closed. Seconds stretched. Then minutes. Then, the locks disengaged. Leary flinched violently, scrambling backward until her spine hit the far wall. Her breath came in ragged gasps as the massive door hissed, internal mechanisms cycling. Light spilled into the cell. But not Karzal light, harsh and red and cruel. This light was white.
Clean.
Almost soft. A figure stood silhouetted in the doorway. Smaller than a carzal. Narrower. Upright, bipedal. Covered in layered armor that looked battered, but functional. A weapon was raised, scanning the cell automatically. Then the figure froze. "Oh, hell," a voice said. It was low, roughened by exhaustion, and something like restrained anger. The weapon lowered slightly. The figure stepped inside. He removed his helmet. Leary stared at a human for the first time. She had seen recordings, grainy intelligence briefs, propaganda reels. Humans were supposed to be loud, reckless, emotionally unstable, supposedly fragile. The man in front of her looked nothing like the caricatures. He had dark hair plastered to his forehead with sweat, skin smeared with ash and blood that was not his own. There were deep lines around his eyes that spoke of sleeplessness and long campaigns. One cheek bore a fresh cut, still bleeding slowly. But his eyes, they widened when they focused on her. Not with hunger, not with calculation, with horror. "Jesus Christ," he whispered. Leary tried to speak. Her throat seized, producing only a dry rasp. She hadn't used her voice in weeks. The human moved immediately, slowly holstering his weapon. He crouched, keeping his hands visible, as though approaching a frightened animal. "Hey," he said softly. "It's okay. You're safe now. I'm not going to hurt you." Safe. The word felt unreal. Dangerous. She shook her head weakly, pressing herself tighter against the wall. Her limbs trembled uncontrollably. The human paused, then nodded, understanding something unspoken.
"Right."
"Okay. I won't come closer," he said. "My name's Sergeant Daniel Reeves. United Terran Marine Corps." He swallowed, jaw tightening as his gaze took in her injuries. The restraints. The scars. "We're here to get you out."
Out.
Leary's vision blurred. She didn't realize she was crying until warm streaks ran down her face. She tried again, forcing air through her lungs. The door. Reeves glanced back at it, then at her. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I opened it." That broke her. She sobbed then, not loud, not dramatic, but deep and shaking, as though something buried far inside her had cracked open at last. Her body folded inward, arms wrapping around herself in a reflex born of countless punishments. Reeves stayed where he was. He did not touch her. He simply waited. Outside, the sounds of battle drew closer, then faded. Human voices echoed down the corridor, efficient and controlled. "Sergeant," a voice crackled over Reeves' calm, "we've secured the upper levels. You find the intel target." Reeves didn't take his eyes off Leary. "Yeah," he said. "And then some." There was a pause. "Understood," the voice replied. "Extraction in 10. Reeves nodded and muted the channel. 10 minutes, he said gently. "We've got time." Slowly, painfully, Leary extended one trembling hand. She didn't touch him. She just reached. Reeves closed the distance carefully, sitting on the floor a short distance away. He removed a small ration bar from his armor, unwrapped it, and set it on the ground between them.
"Food," he said.
"Human compatible. I don't know if it works for you, but it's all I've got." Leary stared at it. Then, with effort that felt monumental, she crawled forward and took it. The taste was bland. Artificial. It was the best thing she had ever eaten. The extraction was a blur. Reeves lifted her when her legs gave out, cradling her with a strength that surprised her. His armor was warm, solid, real. He shielded her with his body when they passed fallen Carzal soldiers, his grip tightening whenever a nearby explosion rocked the corridor. No one touched her without permission. No one shouted at her. When a medic tried to approach too quickly aboard the dropship, Reeves raised a hand and said, "Slow. She's been through hell." And they listened. Leary spent the first days aboard the human medical frigate drifting in and out of consciousness. Every time she woke, she expected the door. It never came. Instead, there were soft lights, gentle voices, gravity adjusted to her comfort, nutrient solutions tailored to her biology, privacy screens. Reeves visited once per shift, usually silent, sometimes bringing small objects, a warm blanket, a translated datapad, a flowering plant from the ship's hydroponics bay. He never asked questions. When she finally found the strength to speak again, her voice was hoarse but steady. "Why?" she asked him. He frowned slightly. "Why what? Why come for me?" Reeves leaned back in the chair beside her bed, exhaling slowly. "Because someone needed to open the door," he said. "And because no one deserves what they did to you." The war did not end with her rescue. If anything, it escalated. But Leary became more than a rescued prisoner. She testified before the Galactic Assembly, her words amplified across systems. She showed them scars. She played recordings the Karzal had never meant to survive. She named names. And humanity stood behind her. Human fleets joined the war not as conquerors, but as relentless liberators. Wherever Karzal black sites were discovered, human soldiers went in first, not to claim territory, but to open doors. The Dominion had believed fear was the strongest weapon. They learned what humans did with rage tempered by compassion. Years later, Leary stood on a balcony overlooking a reconstructed research complex on her home world. The air smelled of blooming life once more. Reeves stood beside her, older now, hair threaded with gray. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly. "Coming through that door?" He looked at her, then out at the horizon. "No," he said. "That was the easiest decision I ever made." Leary smiled. For the first time in a long, long while, the door behind her was open, and she knew it would never close again. The ceremony was small, by interstellar standards. There were no grand fleets overhead, no booming speeches meant to echo through history. Just a gathering of survivors, diplomats, and soldiers beneath the open sky of Serity Prime. The twin suns dipped low, painting the horizon in violet and gold, the same colors Leary remembered from before the war, before the cell, before the door. She stood at the center platform, her posture straight despite the faint tremor that still lived in her limbs. Scars remained, some visible, many not, but they no longer defined the shape of her life. Around her neck hung a crystalline emblem of the Concord, restored to her after years of absence. It no longer felt heavy. When she spoke, the crowd fell silent. "I endured 2 years believing the universe had forgotten me," Leary said, her voice steady, amplified softly across the plaza. "I believed cruelty was the natural state of power, and that silence was the price of survival." She paused, her gaze finding a familiar human figure among the assembled guests. Then a human soldier opened a door. The words rippled outward, carried by translators into 100 languages. Some listeners wept openly. Others clenched their jaws, remembering doors of their own. Leary continued, "Humanity did not save me because it was profitable. They did not save me because it was easy. They saved me because suffering existed, and that was reason enough." The emblem of the Terran Union was raised beside the Concord sigil that day, not as a symbol of dominance, but of resolve. From that moment on, the Liberation Accords were ratified unanimously. Any world discovered to be operating abuse sites, black prisons, or extraction camps would face immediate joint intervention, led more often than not by human forces. The galaxy learned something fundamental in the years that followed. Humans were not the strongest species. They were not the oldest. They were not the most advanced. But when confronted with cruelty, they did not look away. Later, long after the crowds dispersed, Leary stood alone at the edge of the plaza. The air was cool, peaceful.
Real.
Footsteps approached. "You did good up there," Sergeant Daniel Reeves said, hands resting casually at his sides. She smiled, turning toward him. "You opened the door," she replied. "I just walked through it." Reeves shook his head gently. "You survived what was behind it. That part was all you." They stood in silence for a moment, watching the suns dip below the horizon. Somewhere, far beyond Serity Prime, there were still doors waiting to be opened. Still cells hidden in the dark. Still voices unheard. But now, the galaxy knew something else too. If you built a door to keep hope out, one day, a human would come knocking.